The third piece of this is shifting from reaction to response. This is so crazy. This has happened. I've been digging deep in this the past few weeks, and I'm not gonna lie, I screwed up this weekend. I had a reaction situation versus responding. Even though I teach all this stuff, right? We're all guilty and have these things, what? Triggers, right? I was actually on a call with my marriage coach yesterday, Keith, and this dude's the most outgoing, crazy guy. He drives this nice Porsche. He's crazy. He's just crazy. He just talks crazy stuff. He listens to loud music everywhere he goes. Man, what's the one guy who won American Idol that has a Freddie? What's not Freddie something? Anyways, he listens to this one guy all the time. But anyways, he was saying he was going to the cleaners this week, and he pulled into the right to go get a parking spot. Then he veered back to the left real quick, and guess what? A guy came flying around him, slammed on brakes, and he's like, "Bro, what the hell are you doing?" And he's, "Hey, man, my bad. Very, very sorry about it." And Keith is like black belt in jiu-jitsu, like pretty badass dude. This guy gets out, comes and spits on his Porsche. And he's like, "Man, I had a choice to make at that point, right? In terms of what to do. Do I get out and battle with this guy who I think I easily could have crushed? Or do I have a response that's not going to ruin my day and ruin the situation," right? And I de-escalated it, and we just talked about how we've kind of grown through that. And I was talking to him on our call yesterday about what we're teaching and what we're going through. We all kind of have the same exact stuff, and all of us have these certain levels of triggers that will get us. And for me, I was on Saturday, I had multiple triggers. I had certain things, I had an issue with our au pair, and Luke was kind of going crazy. Then we just had a reservation at Yamato's, which we go to every single Saturday, right? Text the manager, "Hey, come in at 7 o'clock. We got there a little early, so I walked around outside with Luke for like 45 minutes. He's going crazy. We go in, we get our little thing, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and 30 minutes later, Luke's climbing on the tables in like the waiting bar area, and guess what happened? I had enough. I finally had enough, and guess what happened? My trigger. It went off, and it went off. And I paid my bar tab. I said, "Man, this place, I'm out." So we come here every freaking weekend. I made a reservation 4 hours ago. I'm sitting here 30 minutes later, like, we're leaving. I'm done. And I snatched up Luke, told Kaylee's talking to the manager. I said, "We're getting out of here for this. If they want to take care of us and appreciate our business, come here every single weekend, then they should got us in sooner." And we left. And then obviously, afterwards, what do you think happened? Felt a little bad about it, right? And so then the bartender guy texted me, "Man, I'm so sorry about it. Look, man, I handled that wrong. I probably could handle it a little better." Went back, reevaluated that. In that situation, we all have certain levels, but I went to where I reacted instead of what? Responded. And if I had done it correctly, I could have paused and I could have taken Luke outside and walked around for a few minutes. Because then what happened, I let Luke down because Luke wanted to see his favorite cook guy, which is action. And he even said something yesterday. He said, "Daddy, you took me away from action." So like, one of those things that we got to learn from. And so the problem is all of us are guilty of this, which is why it's relevant today, both with clients, both with life, both with our spouse. And it's just a powerful thing. It's so weird. I've had multiple different coaches talk about it in the last week. I had my own personal experience, which I'm really, really good at that stuff. But I tracked it back to like 2 things that happened prior to that day, and I was just on edge. Plus, you had a couple of drinks in there. It doesn't really add too much to that, right? So the reality is, so what do you guys think the difference is? What's the difference between reaction and response? You got this whole thing of reaction.
Reaction is the emotional response behind it.
Yeah, we talked about this before, right? So reaction is purely what? Emotion, right? That means I'm coming back there, and so that's key part. And here's the thing, I talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's a great reminder. The number one thing that gets in the way of human intelligence is what? Emotion. Human emotion, right? So for me, smart thing would have been to do what? Take Luke outside, walk around for a few more minutes, and just eat dinner and be done with it. But instead, had to argue with Kaylee on the way home. We didn't get like an argument, but she was obviously not very happy. And I was not very happy, and so we were totally fine when we got home. Then I had to cook dinner, had to make something. Thankfully, I had food prep already there. Had to make the kids dinner, and by then it took longer than we'd actually done to do what? Just deal with the issue, right? And so, but for me at that point, it's about being emotional, being right, and being felt like. And you break down the emotion that you feel disrespected because you come to this stuff. And for me, it's just a way of you feel entitled when I shouldn't have. And so I stacked and went back through it. But the reality is that's something that we all do. And so here's the thing. We got to get good at understanding how we feel, put it into words. How do you get better at putting it into words? You just write about it, journal about it. That's what I do with mine. There's 2 models to talk about, but I want you guys to write this down. Maturity is the ability to prioritize values before feelings. So maturity means prioritize values before feelings. I missed that. Prioritize the values before feelings. What does that mean?
Is it like before thinking like what value it brings if you have a reaction?
So I make my decisions or how I act based on my values. So my values and how I show up and who I am, right, is typically not the guy that was in the Yamatos the other night, right? My value, right, is being respectful, doing certain things, and making sure I have patience and do what I need to do. But obviously, anybody had children, as a while, your patience can run thin, right? When they're climbing on top of tables inside the restaurant, your patience tend to run thin, right? And so, but going back to it's just you got deeper levels of maturity. Here's a great quote. The child does what feels right. The adult does what is right. And so, I'll say it again. The child does what feels right. The adult does what is right. And so we all have this place, we fall into this place of like being like Peter Pan, right? What's the story behind Peter Pan? Never grows up, right? So that's like a child. Today's world, we see this all around us. There's a lot of people who are still running around like Peter Pan, both male and female, right? They're driven by emotion. They're ping-ponging around by emotion. Everything that happens, life happens in this autopilot, and they're just getting drilled from every direction. So everything they do is reactionary versus what? Responding, and responding from a position of strength and values. And so that's the key part. The problem, child does not know how to regulate emotion. And so we have a bunch of Peter Pans that run around with that. And so here's the deal, right? It can be I value discipline, but if I value discipline as one of my values, but I get caught up in the conversation and things that take me off my game, that doesn't mean I value discipline to a level to get to what I want. Does that make sense? We can value something, so I value discipline, but if I get taken off my game through email, reactionary items, and so this is going to get deeper. We talk about how do you get from reactionary items in business to proactive items. It comes down to your values and your discipline. Does that make sense? And so we tend to value problem solving more than production. And so what happens is we get sucked into problem solving instead of production. It takes away from our ability to produce more business, right? And so that's where this gets deeper in that scenario thing. And so here's the deal, right? The single most important thing that you can do for emotional mastery, what do you guys think it is? You got to know your goals. Right? Why? Because your goals can be your compass. So if I know what my goals are and what my desire is to have, I'll be able to adopt the beliefs that get me through that for the action. And so that's the key part. And so the values are feelings. Values, what they are, they're principles or standards that guide decisions. So the values, I'll say it again for you guys overall, they're principles or standards that guide decisions and behaviors. That's a key part there, right? Feelings are something that I'll break down like this. They're emotional reactions that are often temporary, influenced by external events. So for example, my issue on Saturday was what? A feeling of emotional reaction that was typically above what it was. That compounded two or three things. It's usually never the one thing. It's typically the two or three things that led to the one thing that really have us be triggered and make the wrong response, right? And so that's just something for us to look at overall. And there's two ways to look at this. I'll give you a drawing of what it looks like, but I'll give you an example of how things are out of control. So we'll just say out of control. And so what happens typically when we get in a place of out of control, so I can change colors, you have what we call a situational value. What do you think that means? A situational value.
Like it's based on the situation.
Yep, so that would be something like what? Kids acting up. It's so true, right? Because where Luke was on top of the table was next to a door, which is next to the water, which is next to the lake at Broadway. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this is getting crazy. He could get in the water. He'd be in the water in 2 seconds at dark, at night. And then obviously we'll talk about in a second how we have these things that go around that. And so that's kind of also what set me off. And so what happens, a situation of value happens, which is not a value in who we are, right? So a client says something wrong to you, says something wrong thing. It's not who you are, but you have a value that's temporary based on the situation. Does that make sense? And that value can be something like anger, resentment, a feeling that you have. And so what happens is that drives the second thing, which is emotion. And it triggers what? The emotion. That emotion can be something like anger, frustration, disrespect. And so my situation was like a disrespect. Man, I'm here every freaking weekend. Planned ahead. We text at like 4 o'clock. And what happened was she didn't see the text, and then she put us on the list. And then we still had to wait in line after we got there with 2 kids. Right? And Baron and Liz were there too. And I was like, Baron's like, looked at him, his eyes are this big. I'm like, dude, I'm getting out of here, dude. I'm done. Period. Right? And I probably could have handled it. I could have left nicely a lot better, and I didn't leave in a bad way. But at the same time, it was very, very abrupt because why? Had emotional trigger. And so the situation triggers an emotion, which typically is not us, but it's a natural reaction. So then what do you think happens next?
You start feeling bad?
Not quite. That comes later. Triggers an action. An action. So the next piece of that, this is how we act out of control, right? So this situational value comes, the situation thing comes up, boom, it triggers something for us, which gives what?
Bad reaction.
Emotion, which is like, man, I'm angry, disrespected. This happens in relationships, this happens with your clients, this happens in anything, through negotiation, through deals. And so all of a sudden we have this natural reaction of what it is, and I'll explain to you guys why it is in a little bit. But we have this part, and typically the emotion calls us to an action. Now, later on, do we think we'll regret the action? In many cases we do. Why? Because we're out of control. And so it becomes a cycle for most people that aren't enlightened, right? So then the action goes to this next place here for most people, which is belief. What do you think that means?
Your internal stories?
Yes. And so what do you think that means? The belief then later on becomes a justification for most people. So they'll create a story to do what? Justify their action. That's what I was on the way home, right? My wife might do that. We're here every friggin' week and we spend thousands and thousands of dollars at this place, right? All this stuff becomes more than anybody ever does. And so it creates this justification. And thankfully I have enough emotional intelligence, enough emotional mastery to realize, hey, really quickly that probably wasn't the best solution. But for most people, they tend to do that. They anchor it in with justification. And what happens here? The cycle just continues on. And they live in this world being out of control based on what? Situational values. And so what happens is for most people that are outside of here, that are outside of what we do, their life is driven by what? Situations. And the emotions that come from situations, that's why our life is out of control. And if you look back any time in our life when our life was out of control, guess what? We allowed it to be driven by situations and the emotions behind them. Make sense? And so part of what we want to do is get good at taking control of this. I'll kind of get ahead and kind of give you a little bit about that. And so how do you get out of this, right? How do you switch this? There's another way to look at it. It's a similar, actually I can do it below it. So it's on the same page. So what's the way to look at this? This way to look at it here is having this place of alignment, which we talked about the other day, right? And so alignment starts with what? I get back and say, okay,
In control.
what's my desired value? So desired value doesn't always equal the situational value. Make sense? So my desired value would have been what? To have a great dinner, to have a great experience with my family, to do those things that we always do. And that would have been what the ultimate outcome was. And for my kid to be happy, my wife to be happy, right? Even if I wasn't happy, my desired value would be for what?
Everybody else here.
Then to be happy. But that's not what happened because I allowed situational to control that situation. And so this is where we get back into a control alignment. So from that standpoint, right, we take that desired value of what I want, link that, understand, I probably should change colors again, back to a principle. And that principle in my situation, hey, understand that we're waiting really long, that we've obviously been here 30 minutes last what we've been supposed to be here, and my kids are going crazy. But the principle is, hey, I'm going to do it right for my family, and I'll make sure that I create capacity for me able to deal with and do what needs to be done. Make sense? And so that obviously creates, and that leads to a belief, or what's another word for that? Justification. And then that leads to the action. So can you see the difference there?
Like moving before you act.
Yes, so the belief and the principle becomes before what? The action. And I'm taking the emotion, I'm swapping the emotion out with what? The principle. And so now I live based on a principle-based life versus an emotion-based life. And so with that, what do you think comes on the back end? More fruit, more results that actually drive what I want. This is true for your phone calls. This is true for your prospecting, for your lead follow-up, for your client presentations, for your client negotiations. All that stuff is here because if I allow anything in my business to be driven by emotion, what happens? I'm done. Anybody ever really come in really hardcore to feel like making phone calls? No, right? No one does. But the reason that it's so valuable and you make so much money for it is because most people live on emotion, they can't get it done. And so for me to live on principle allows me to come through and get it done and make the tough phone calls and have the conversations that allow me to get what I want, take the right action, which allows me to get what I want from the outcome standpoint. Does this make sense? And so I'll come back teaching this, but that's the difference of living out of control, where most people operate, and you'll see this happen around you as you study and learn this, that most people in your life around outside of here, or at least don't have success at a high level, are living out of control based on situations and emotion. And where I want us to get to and live from is a place of desired values, what I want, and then also the principles that I live by. So if I'm driven by principles, no matter how I feel, I still do what? What's right. And so based on the belief, right, that I'm going to get the outcome I want by taking the right action, and then all of a sudden it continues to go on. And as there are more results, the results here compound in a good way, the results here compound in a bad way. One leads to a trail of destruction, one leads to a trail of results. Make sense? And so this is where we want to get to in terms of what we want. And so we have to make sure that we value values over feelings. You value values over feeling, right? Most people respond to triggers, and so that's a key part. So we talked about values, principles, and standards that guide decisions and behaviors. They represent what's important and meaningful in life. For example, there's integrity, responsibility, kindness. Those things matter there. And so that's a key part. Feelings, right? We talked about emotional reactions are often temporary, influenced by external events. Typically, if you feel yourself being reactionary to external things, guess who's in control? Not you. They are. Period. And so if I feel myself being controlled or taking what it was, it tends to get more out of control what it was, right? And so I allow myself to get, and typically like mine on Saturday is not one thing. You got to get control of the small things early on, or the small things will create the big thing. Does that make sense? And so that's a key thing of what it was. And we went to this buddy's place earlier where we had the babysitter, and we went and had this little tiki bar we go to, been waiting for this seat in the sun because it was freezing for like an hour. Couple gets up, I tell the guy, Scott, I know very well, hey man, I'm gonna take those seats. He's no problem. Turns around, this couple swoops in and takes a seat. And he turns around and serves him. I'm like, what the hell's going on, dude? Like, I'm same thing. I'm here every weekend, man. And thankfully, he talked to them. And hey, this guy been waiting for a seat for like an hour. You guys' mom over there did, boom. So, but I was super triggered at that point. I'm like, man, I'm angry, right? So then all of a sudden, I had this issue with the au pair. She wasn't wanting to get off early, been super lazy about stuff, certain things, right? And all of a sudden, I'm triggered about that. We deal with that issue. And then all of a sudden, the small thing comes along. And what do you think happened? Boom, it blew the big trigger, right? And so it's just a great lesson to look back about the small ones, how we got to make sure that we execute. And I'm really good at this, and I pride myself on this, and obviously there are just certain things that just add up, but ultimately, you know, when kids are on tables and certain things happen, it tends to expose you pretty quickly, right? And so that's the key thing. So here's the deal. What's the science behind this, right? What's the science behind reaction? That's what I want to kind of get to. Why do we do that we do? I want you guys to write down the science of reaction. So what do you think that means?
What's actually causing anger, right?
Yeah, why does it do that? Why do we do that?
Conflict with ego, maybe?
Ego's part of it, yeah, in a way. Deeper. Yes, you're close on. So the brain's not designed to keep us happy. It's designed to do what? Keep us alive, right? It's designed to keep us, protect us. And so anything that happened, this strong emotional response is designed to do what? To get us to react, which is to move. So, right, car comes at you, golf balls hit at you, something's come at you. It's designed to get you to react quickly with emotion to allow you to move very quickly so that you can survive that process. Now, in turn, in our world that we're in today, where things are much safer, it tends to leave a trail of destruction if I allow that to lead the way. Most people are allowed, it actually goes down scientifically, this place called, how do you say it? Amygdala, A-M-Y-G-D-A-L-A. Amygdala, right? Which is a part of the limbic system, right? It's responsible for processing emotions and detecting threats. It's designed to keep us safe by initiating a quick automatic response, often referred to as what? Fight or flight. And they also have the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so that's the key part of understanding, hey, look, this is in our DNA. It's in how we show up. It's in how we operate as humans. And so what the reality is, we have to understand and get clear of, hey, do I want to actually respond from this place of anger, or do I want to react from the heart? And so I want you guys to get good at this understanding and say, look, you have to understand most time what you want in your heart is not what you want in your head. So for example, you get into an argument in the parking lot like my buddy Keith, right? Get some guy who comes up to you. Ultimately, the brain says, I want to do what? Fight this guy, knock him out, right? But the heart ultimately wants to do what? Get your clothes from the clothing place, from the dry cleaners, and move on and go back to your family. Because you make it with the wrong guy, he's got a gun on him, all of a sudden you don't make it back to your family, right? And so the reality, we have to get in part where we make the decision from our heart, not from our head. And part of that just got to train ourselves to stop that fight or flight and to get into a place of thought from the heart. And I'll talk about in a second how we do it. So how do you do that, right? Number one, right? You fight, you lash out, become defensive. Flight means you avoid the situation. And 3, freeze, you feel stuck or paralyzed. And so it's designed for great physical survival, like jumping out of the way of an oncoming car. Modern life is triggered by non-threatening situations such as tough email or Dale being in the parking lot, right? Those are natural things that can happen. But the reality is it also goes back to us getting stuck in reaction mode too. It's natural, so it's a key part of you understand, like you can't beat yourself up. This reactionary stuff that we have is natural. So why do I tend to want to attend to my email or fix my home inspection or call the client back instead of make my calls?
Because you don't want to be.
It's our fight or flight design system, and we just want to solve the problem, right? And so for us, it's an addiction in many cases for us to solve the problem versus do the thing that actually drives the income on the back end. And so as humans and as big business people, we have to get good at overcoming them and getting out of that. And so that's the key part, right? So talk about a couple of different things. What drives these, right? Triggers, situations, words, actions to spark an intense emotional response. They come from really 3 main things. Number 1 is unresolved past experiences. What do you think an example of that is? All right, unresolved past experience. And so the unresolved past, that's something that reminds you of a negative event. Your brain responds as if it's happening again. And this is true. This happens a lot. We're talking about this kind of in a coaching thing before, where if you've ever been to a place you had like no money for a long time and you struggle for money a lot, I've been through this where you have this deep emotional trauma. where you feel like it's never enough, right? You have this feeling like it's going to go away, and so no matter what, you don't ever feel safe, and so you have to work through that, and to work through that in your brain to get to a place where you can get to a place of prosperity and not be driven by fear. And so in many cases, people are still making bad decisions, thinking they're going to lose everything, when in reality they're not. They tend to make too bad of scarcity decisions, and they don't make enough investments or things like that to get them where they want. That's a big situation. Looking at example, unresolved past experiences. The other one is fear of judgment or failure, right? We'll talk fear of judgment. What do you think that means?
You're afraid of what people are going to think about you.
Yeah, which would be things like what? The number one thing that we relate to in our business.
Do I post on social media?
Or making calls, you don't want to get.
Making phone calls. They don't want to be judged by people.
Pointing down.
So just, what's it doing?
It's just zooming in and out. It's pointing down at the ground. You can't just.
There you go.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's recording.
All right, we'll fix that part. So, fear of judgment, which comes down to what? Making phone calls, buyer presentation, listing presentation. We'll tend to avoid that conversation because we don't want to be what? Rude or judge. We feel like we judge, and so that's something that is a trigger that's emotional that I need to get. That's a fight or flight, right? I'm just going to fight it. So if I don't want to fight them, what do most people tend to do when it comes to dial time? Avoid it. They pretend to make the dials. I'm going to get to it, but I'd rather clean my desk instead. Right? And so it's one of those things that is a big example you have to understand about again. The third one is just stress overload, right? Chronic stress lowers your ability to think rationally, making you more prone to react impulsively. That typically has 2 or 3 things. So what I got to do, I got to really find a way to relieve stress or increase my capacity. And that comes through personal development, which understanding and learning in terms of how I do that, right? We talked about this on our call the other day. We have to get better. So if I don't, this just happens through getting better. We talked about I don't go to the gym every day and just say, man, I want to lift 15-pound weights for the rest of my life, right? I go to the gym to do what? Get stronger and bigger. We have to look at this emotional mastery the same exact way. I was talking about this with Keith, the marriage guys. We have to make sure that our job here is to grow our capacity in how we show up, not just be able to hopefully have less stress. Does that make sense? Most people in life, they want to have less stress instead of grow their capacity. And that's just going to the gym every day and lifting 15-pound weights for the next 2 years. And so that's a mental shift I want you guys to look at. Look, I don't want to be in a business, a life of less stress. I want to be in a life of more capacity so I can deal with more and it doesn't mean as much. Does that make sense? And so that's where the personal development piece comes in, which is a big difference. And so that's the key part, right? How many people have been stressed out in life and directed to stress other people? Right? Me too. I did it Saturday, right? I'll admit it. I called it out myself and be vulnerable with that, right? And so here's the deal, right? How many of times we've done that, respond to someone defensively because we felt judged? Right? It happens all the time. And most of the time, if that thing does happen, it's a mirror for us to kind of look in and reflect on that. Sometimes they're judgmental, sometimes it's us. It goes back to that thing. Did you really dislike the pastor, or did you feel like you got called out, right? Did you dislike the pastor, or was he right in what he was saying? And so that's just something we have to be aware of, and there's both situations what that may be overall, right? And so here's the key part I want you guys to get to, and we'll get to the next phase of this, is that this is what happens for most people. Most reactions for humans. And check this out. This is a great stat. 95% of the average American behaviors are on autopilot. What do you think that means? Yes. This is all the pieces start to come together. 95% of behavior for Americans is autopilot. So what does that mean, you think?
That you're stuck in the same routines?
They're stuck in the same routines, the same patterns over and over and over and over. It's true. That's why you see the same people miss a huddle over and over and over and over for the same stuff. That's why you see things happen. People go through the same cycle over and over and over. They're rather roller coaster real estate, right? Whatever it is. Because most people are stuck in this place of autopilot in terms of how it breaks down, which gets crazy, right? And so this is based on multiple things, our past experience and habits. And here's the crazy part. Why does that happen? Somebody mentioned a second ago. I want to break this down for you guys and put the pieces together.
The way we're conditioned.
Yep. What's driving that?
Our
Subconscious.
brain. Yeah.
So that's being driven by your subconscious. So your patterns, how you react, how you see everything is driven by your subconscious. This is why it's so hard to change. And so what happens is you have this issue coming on where everything you do for most people is being run by your subconscious. And so here's the deal. In order to grow, you have to get very, very, very clear on what you want. Why?
You gotta tell yourself you have to establish
You
goals.
interact yourself in your conscious.
I have to use my conscious brain to do what? Reprogram the subconscious. I literally have to use the conscious brain to go back in and reprogram, rewire the conscious brain. This is why it's so important to, number one, have your goals. Number two, write your goals out. Say again, this is why it's so important. Number one, have your goals. Number two, write your goals out. Greg Cardone does this over and over and over. He writes them down every single day. Every single day. Our coach talks about this with them on every Thursday call. They write them down in their office every morning. And so she forced us to do it last week, and it was just powerful to go back and your big long goals, what you want long term. And so it's something that's very helpful, but it just talks about why it is, because you have to write your goals down and you get hyper conscious on what you want in your life. Why? Because you have to train the subconscious on a new default. I'll say it again. I'm going to train the subconscious on a new default. Well, how do I do that? What's the best way to do it?
Goals, write it down.
Write it down. And there's two main things you're going to write down. We'll talk about in a second. Number one, goals. Number two, values. That's the key part. Because the reality is most people are getting stuck on autopilot, right? And so most reactions happen on autopilot. They're not constantly deciding on how to act. Their brain's running on a pre-programmed script based on past experiences and habits. Oftentimes, the reacting becomes the default mode of operation because, number one, it's faster. The brain doesn't have to process deeply. It's just automatic, right? That's why most people get triggered by all the small stuff over and over and over and over and over because they're just on autopilot and the brain's just in defense mechanism all the time. Number two, it feels natural. So reacting is instinctive. It requires no effort. And so by the way, it may feel easier in the moment. It often leads to regret, misunderstandings, and consequences that don't serve your goals. And so it's a big way, right? It's a big thing to think about. So talk about reprogramming, and we'll talk about this in a minute. We'll get ahead of it. But values. What are values? I mentioned it earlier. The belief what you drive your life. So here's the deal. If you ask 100 people to give their top 10 values in their life, how many do you think can answer that for you?
I say 2.
I can.
I'd say 1 or 2. So you got 10 values that drive your life?
Yeah.
What are they?
Loyalty, well, okay, I could do 5.
See what I'm saying?
I think, like,
That's
number
big.
1, loyalty, positivity.
Yep. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so here's the crazy part. So if you take anything from today, I want to take an hour this afternoon and write down 10 values that drive your life. Not that drive your life now, but what more importantly, what? What you want to drive your life. And so we're pretty good about it. I started going through it too. I was like, all right, look at obviously our core values of the company. They're built from me and who we are and who we were at the time. But obviously we've added in there lately. Personal responsibility is a big one, right? Personal development is another one. Contribution is another one, right? We talked about loyalty, discipline, right? 100-0. Those are kind of some of the big ones there. And typically after that, I tend to kind of look back, obviously, some of the ones we have here. But we'd say do the work over and over and over. But those are things that have to drive it. And so if I don't know what my 10 values are, to even say them, what's the chance I'm really driving my life based on values versus emotion?
Very low.
Very little, right? Which is why we feel stressed out all the time, which is why, but here's the crazy part. I want you guys to look at it like this. A value, it's just like a standard. So if I know my standards, the decision becomes much easier because the decision is based on standard, not emotion. Makes sense? And so if I know here that our core values here and what we really kind of stand for in this era too, especially as personal responsibility and personal development, somebody comes in an interview, Ryan, and they have a lot of victim language and everything's the government's fault and everybody else's fault. What do we say then? Not interested, right? It's a very easy decision. Why? They don't align with our value.
I want to help them.
I just can't see myself, going no way anymore. I used to.
But if you have somebody who's truly, okay, let's say they don't want to take responsibility for what they have in their life, their current situation, right? And they're in that situation where, and one of us no negativity. And they come in there, do we want that person in the organization?
No.
Why?
It's like cancer.
It doesn't align with our, and not necessarily cancer, it doesn't align with our standard. Right? And our values. And so if you guys can really take something away, and I hope you kind of do this, and obviously you want to base a lot of that. We went through this as a team organization when we created these. I do think that we have too many at this point. I've taught a lot of my coach when I get to 4 or 5 just as an organization. So you can just rattle them off nothing. But this is stuff that you want to drive your life and your decisions. So I know that, hey, look, my core value and how I drive my life is discipline, right? Outside of here. And I got to get up and go to the gym or not, I don't feel like it, what do I do? I go anyway, right? Is there any doubt I'll be there in the morning? Why? Because I drive my life based on that decision, right? And so it's the same thing, we got to get clear on what they are, but a lot of times we're not clear on what our values are. And so I want you guys to take an hour today and write out 10, and obviously you want to take that, and I want you guys to get 5 that you can remember off the top. Of like, not just who you are now, but who you want to be 12 months from now, who you want to be 24 months from now. And that person is what drives it. Okay, and so that's a key thing that's very, very important. Here's the deal. I want you guys to look at something called the cost of reaction. What's the cost of reaction, you think?
You know how you can react. If you cause
Yeah, big ways, right? Number one, damaged relationship. So me, looking back, right, I might have damaged relationship with a manager who loves me and gets me in the middle of summer when there's a 3-hour wait. And so part of that now, I got to go back and do what? Repair that. And I've already, the bartender guy who loves us, man, he already texted me yesterday, like, hey man, very, very sorry about what happened. I wrote back, say, hey man, that's not your fault, that's my fault. You know, I should have handled that better. I apologize about that. And I owned it, and he's very appreciative about that. And so the reality is that, number one, the cost of reaction is damaged relationship. Number two, missed opportunities. If we react impulsively, it might make you overlook long-term benefits for short-term satisfaction. Again, reacting impulsively makes you overlook long-term benefits for short-term satisfaction, which would be things like not making phone calls, right? Not responding to a lead in time, not texting and emailing them, right? Whatever it is. And then the third one, which is really the biggest one, is internal chaos. If I live reactively, it creates stress, frustration, and a sense of being overwhelmed. Why? Why do you think it does that? What's the number one reason for that? We're out of control. So if I'm not controlling my life and everything's happening to me, and I feel like the life and the world's happening to me all the time, how does that feel?
Out of control.
Out of control, chaotic, terrible, not good. But if I have a way with personal responsibility, now I step into a place of alignment, and I control my emotions, control my issues, control the things I have, now all of a sudden life becomes much more enjoyable. Now here's the crazy part. It's a little bit less exciting, but much more enjoyable. Many people are addicted to chaos and the uncertainty, which is why their life is constantly in turmoil. I'll say it again. Many people are addicted to chaos, which is why their life is currently always in turmoil. And so you have to be able to trade one to get the other. I would much rather have the stability and the long-term fulfillment than the excitement and chaos. Does that make sense? Discipline, guess what? It's pretty boring. Same thing, over and over and over and over, right? Same time, same place every day. But with that, I have a high level of results in the back end, which makes life enjoyable, and you have a lot more choices in terms of how you want to operate. Make sense? So that's a key thing to look at overall with that. And so same thing in business. And here's the crazy part. The more you grow, the easier it is to fool people. What do you think that means? The more you grow, and the better you get this, the more it's easy to fool people.
The more you become a leader, they perceive you as a leader.
Kind of. So the more that you grow,
As you grow, then control your emotions, the easier it is to fool people on how you actually feel.
and how you actually show up. So as you get good at this, the out of control here becomes more subtle. It's more small things. So that would be something, for example, I wrote kind of a name, is that you fool everyone, right? That you do what you need to do. You make the phone calls, but you get sucked into the Facebook scroll. You start scrolling on Facebook, or you get the extra 45-minute call, or you get distracted by everybody that walks by your desk, right? Those are small things that tend to get people sucked in. And that's a small example of being value-driven versus emotional-driven in terms of that, right? That goes the difference between you're reactive to every single person that walks by your desk, so you don't make your calls for the day. I'm reactive to the home inspection issue or the small issues. And so those are things that come up. It's very easy to learn about the reaction at the restaurant, but what about the subtle one when I'm at my desk making phone calls and either do or don't do the work, right? That's where the rubber meets the road in terms of that, which makes a big difference. And so that's the key thing. And ultimately, it comes down to what you respond to. And not every single problem needs a response. Not every single phone call needs a response. Not every single issue needs a response. Until I focus on what moves the needle first, which is my value-driven, solution where it may be. And so how do I manage emotional triggers? I'm going to give you guys the next kind of piece to this, which I think is super helpful. So we talked about this before, but I'll hit a little bit more. What's the first piece of this? I said the other day. What's the first way to do this? Yep, I want to pause, right? I want to pause and breathe, right? When you feel triggered, number one, I want to pause. I'm going to add something else to this today in a minute. A second phase to this that we haven't talked about before. First thing's pause. Why?
So you don't have an immediate reaction.
I don't have immediate reaction. I have to pause and figure out, okay,
Don't react to your first thought.
I've got to go from emotion to value, right? I've got to go from reacting to responding. Responding means take responsibility of that. So pause and breathe. When you feel triggered, you take a moment to pause, deep breaths, right? You can leave and go to the bathroom, come back, whatever it needs to be. If you get a bad phone call, angry client, bad text message, drop the phone, walk outside, come back. That's one way, because why? I reset my emotion. I get back from emotion, from survival technique to what? Being proactive in terms. Number two, here's where it comes in. Label the emotion. Understand, hey, look, I want to label it. So that would be something like what? I'm angry, right? I feel dismissed, like I feel disrespected, like I think I felt on Saturday, right? In terms of that. And the simple action can reduce the intensity of the emotion. Hey, look, here's how I feel. Number three, which we do in our stack all the time. I want to challenge the thought. What does that mean, you think? I want to challenge the thought, right? And so, actually, is this reaction based on fact, or am I assuming the worst? Is this based on fact or is this based on feeling? And reframing the situation can help see it more objectively, right? Number 4, focus on the present. What you find the situation, right, is not the same as past experiences. And here's why. Most of our reactions are based on what? Past experiences. So if I have a bad investment, right, years ago, and I'm exposed to this new investment, what do most people tend to do? Bring the bad investment emotions into the new investment, right? There's a saying in waiting tables I think is very powerful, is you don't take table 18 to table 14. What does that mean? I don't let the bad people who are at table 18, who are, let's say, jerks, right? Who are people who are in pain. They're not just people in pain. But I don't take them to table 14. Why?
Your tip's going to be way smaller.
Tips are way smaller on 14 too. And so the reality is I got to make sure I can segment and separate the difference of those two situations. So what do we do in real estate? You have one bad client, one bad issue, get yelled at, get hung up on. And what people tend to do is take that into the next call, and that harms your income. Make sense? And so that's a key part there in what I do there. Focus on the present. Remind yourself this situation is not the same as past experiences. Separates what's happening now, what's happened before in the past. What do we tend to do? Link it up. So like even Saturday, I link it up. Man, had the thing happen earlier, had the thing happen with the au pair. Boom, the third thing set it off, and that's what lit the fireworks. Right? And so that's a simple mistake of linking the three together. The power of emotion comes when you link two emotions together. Make sense? Same thing with your spouse. It's typically not one thing, it's two things that stack, 2 or 3 things that stacked up. Boom, they did this. And all of a sudden you make a pattern out of something that's not really a pattern. Number 5, practice self-compassion. Right? Acknowledge it's normal to have triggers and don't judge yourself. I'm going to give you something else in a second. So, pausing helps interrupt the pattern, right? Asking what the next, and here's another thing you can do too. After number 2, I wrote this in my notes too, is ask what's the next best thing I can do or say. What's the next best thing I can do or say that gets me what I want? Big thing there, right? Remember, you're in control of yourself and nobody else. That's a key part, right? That you kind of always got to understand with that. And so here's the thing. What's it mean to respond? Responding is about slowing down and intentionally choosing how you act in a way that aligns with your values, goals, and outcomes. So we talked about reactionary as emotional. Responding is about slowing down and intentionally choosing how to act in a way that aligns with my values, my goals, and the outcome you want. Make sense? And even for relationships, my marriage coach was talking about yesterday, this was like a couple of us on the call, he just says, he's really good at this, is like, his wife was hammering on a Sunday about breakfast about something, about how she felt about something, and he didn't agree with it, right? And so, do you think you argued with her at breakfast?
Yep.
No, he didn't. He's good. And she said, went through the whole thing, he said, listen, he said, okay, great, And she said, you feel the same way? He said, no, but I totally understand and respect your feeling of you feeling that way. And I totally understand that. And I appreciate you telling me. And that's it. He's like, look, I don't got to agree with you. And it's the biggest, people make this mistake in relationships thinking that you have to be on the same exact page on everything. You have to agree on everything. He's like, look, I'm not your father. I don't need to agree with you on everything. And you don't have to agree with everything I do. But I can understand and have empathy about how you feel, so maybe able to make an adjustment on that or meet somewhere in the middle. And I think that's where a lot of disagreement comes in overall. Does that make sense? And there's a really good quote. I'm going to find it really quick just so he actually gave a really good quote yesterday about this. And he says it over and over and over. This will help you guys in relationships all the time. But we talked about, he said, I don't have to agree with her beliefs, but it's okay for her to have them. That's cool, right? Whatever makes sense for you in your life, I'm not your dad in that situation. But here's the deal. Where's it at? Oh, it's a great quote. Man, did I lose it? Hold on. Oh, her response does not dictate my standard, which I thought was so good. Is her response does not dictate my standard. What does that mean, you think?
Your values and principles are still the same, and someone else can have theirs.
Yeah, what do most relationships fall sideways on?
They fight to make the other person want to be on the same page. But you need to have empathy to understand how they feel and how they think is valid. So then you need to come to a mutual agreement.
Yeah.
Because how you both.
They want to be right.
Yeah.
Right?
Fighting to make them believe something that they don't.
Most of the time, they'll be right about it, doesn't even matter. And so having this ability, I learned this from him. He's like, look, her response is ever to be my standard. He says this over and over and over and over and over. And I'll see him next week. He's part of that warrior group. But he's like, she can have a response and all it is, but it doesn't have to be my standard. Meaning, I don't have to go to that. I don't have to react to that. I can take it in and say, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from. I totally appreciate that. I don't necessarily believe that, but I totally give you justification for you to feel that way. You know what? You probably should feel that way. Based on the way you came up. Obviously, I'm not going to tell all that, but that's just where it's coming from. But her response, the client's response, does not have to be your standard. Meaning, I can observe it and choose to operate a certain way. Makes sense? And so this is true for our clients. It's a great example of all this. And so I thought this was a great thing and how multiple things align with that overall. And that's the key thing. So what does it mean to respond, right? So reactionary, it's impulsive or automatic. So here I got reactionary. It's impulsive. What does that mean?
Probably not the best decision.
Right? It's just boom, you feel the pulse coming, right? Just your pulse. You feel your pulse raised when you get super triggered, right? I feel it in my neck sometimes. Kelly says she can see it in my neck sometimes, right? Response. So the opposite side, my response, what will the opposite be?
You take a minute, you think about it.
Yes.
Before you react.
Thoughtful. You got the word I was looking for, thoughtful, right? The key part there is thoughtful and deliberate. So I respond deliberately, not impulsively, right? Second piece, reaction is emotion driven. You know that, we talked about emotion driven. Respond on the opposite side is value driven. I look back to what? My values. No, so let's say my values to be a great husband, a great father who lives on standards. I don't react in terms of that, may not agree with that. So now I can respond in what? A thoughtful, clear way. Most people screw things up by just being emotional. Okay, so that's a key thing that's important to look at there as well. Number 3, reaction, short-term focus. Short-term focus. My example on Saturday was short-term focus, right? Get me out of here. I'm tired of dealing with the kid. I'm tired of waiting on this situation. We'll do it later. And then guess what? It took me a lot longer to solve and clean that up than it did if I would have just sat in the pocket. Make sense? Response is long-term focus. So in that situation, I want to maintain a relationship with the people at the restaurant. I want to maintain a better relationship, with my family in that situation. And obviously be able to enjoy the night. And so that's a key example of making a decision differently looking at. Reactionary is often regretted, right? Most of the time we say some things we shouldn't say or do. You're often doing what? Thinking about that night, or if you're drinking, you think about it the next morning, right? It just kind of is what it is. Say some things you shouldn't say, right? You regret or even don't remember in many cases, right? Looking back historically, things I've gotten better at over the years, but that's something that happens a lot, where responding is usually intentional and satisfying. Hey, I totally understand. I appreciate that. I don't necessarily agree, but you have a definite right to feel that way. And I can see why you do. Make sense? And now, which one's more likely to get you what you want? That one, right? All the other ones. You guys write this down. Reaction equals child. Right? What's a child do when they don't get what they want? Lash out, right? It's crazy. It's so easy to see when a child. Response equals adult. And somebody said this earlier. What's the number one thing that gets in the way of people growing? What do you think it is? Ego. And one of the coaches was talking about, talked to guys, have a $1 billion company. He had just sold his $1 billion company. He said, what's the number one thing that stops people from growing as leaders? He said, that's the easiest question ever. Ego. Every single time. And ego is what? The desire to be right. And so it's desire to be heard, desire to be felt. And so that's the key thing we have to understand. Like, if I want to get what I want, sometimes I can't always be right, which is very, very true to look at. And so the benefits of responding. You choose to respond instead of reacting. You regain control. You no longer are the mercy of external circumstances. You make better decisions. You improve relationships. You reduce stress. And so people that can regulate emotion, respond, make more money. Their spouse likes you more. You have better health and wellness. You have more peace, period. That's why I'm teaching this today. We all need it at every level. We all need reminders of it at every level, which is super important to look at. It's less excitement, like I mentioned, but you have more results. Many are addicted to uncertainty and chaos, which is a big difference. And so that's the key thing to look at overall. Here's a key finalize. This is what I was looking for earlier. Pause, process, choose. That's it. Pause, process, choose. So the way of looking at this, number 1, pause. Talked about that. That's the key. Why? I have to stop myself from doing what? Reacting. The only way to stop myself from reacting is to pause. Why? I have to disengage the fight or flight part of my brain and engage the other part. I can't remember the name of it, but engage the other part, which is obviously allows us to choose. That goes to observer, chooser. So the key part there, I want to obviously pause that part. I lost my part here. Take a deep breath, count to 5. Physically step away from the situation you need to. Obviously, I want to make sure that, why do I do that? It's also called a pattern interrupt. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, a pattern interrupt. So that disrupts the pattern of how I operated on autopilot my entire life. Make sense? And so that's the key part there as well. A trigger to express frustration over delayed response, key part there. Take a deep breath, and obviously I process. What does that mean?
Gives you time to think about what your response is going to be.
Yep, so process means I name the emotion. Why? I want to label it. It's very important I label it. It doesn't have to be wrong, but I want to ask myself key questions. Why am I feeling this way? What's the real issue here? Is this about the present situation or something from my past? That's the key part. Is this about the current situation? Is this only the restaurant here, or there's 3 things happened before this? 2 things happened before this. Very important. And then I want to reframe that. Overall, in that, and then 3, choose. What does choose mean, you think? Choose is the final step. You decide how to respond in a way that aligns with your goals, values, and outcomes. So here's the deal. I choose what?
The adult reaction.
Get what you want. Choose to get what you want. You ever been out like a date night and get in an argument? Huh? Did you get what you wanted? Becomes a lonely night after that. And so the reality is, you also have to choose. So the key thing is, here's the deal. Focus on the outcome. What do I truly want to achieve here? Do I want to be right and argue in the situation? Or do I want to get what I want and have maintain a relationship? Same to the client. I can argue with the client, and what happens? Lose relationship. And obviously, you lose the deal in many cases of that. So does it align with your values? Choosing action reflects who you are, who you want to be. Acting intentionally. Same thing over and all. This talks about happens all the time, even with gossip. One of the best ways to deal with gossip, you say, cool, sounds good, right on. Hey, what do you have going on today? It takes 2 people to engage into gossip. What do people gossip for? They want to see your response. It's an addiction people to see. They want to see your response. They tell you about so-and-so and doing this. They're addicted to see your response because they feel like they bring value, getting a response out of you, and that's what allows it to continue to grow. And so people gossip because they want their response, which is important to look at. So here's a couple of things, right? A couple of issues. We talked about being from alignment, why personal value is so important. They're very, very important of who you want to become and who your personal values are the core beliefs and principles that guide your behavior, your decisions, and your life choices. They act as a compass, helping navigate challenges, priorities, and stay aligned with who you truly are, right? Without understanding, living by the values, you can feel chaotic, directionless, and out of alignment. And so that's like I mentioned, asking 100 people. And so the values define who you are. They value and reflect your identity, your essence of what matters the most to you overall. We talked about that. And here's the crazy part about values. They provide clarity in decision making. We talked about that. Number 2, they build resilience. Why is that? What does that mean, you think? Why do they build resilience?
Because when you rewire, you're restructuring, you're coming out of an emotional phase into more logical, that you can better execute and get a better result.
Yeah. So when I have let's say my value is personal responsibility, right? And I have an issue that happens to me. Now I own that situation. Now what do I get back? Control. Right? And have control back in that situation. So now my value becomes the anchor. And the value drives my decision making and how I react going forward, where now I'm not a victim of the universe. I'm a victim of my decision previously. Now I can make a decision and get out of this. Right? I got the car stuck in the mud. I can get the car out of the mud. And so that's the reality of how it is. And so if perseverance is a core value, you'll push through setbacks in your career because you believe in long-term reward. You bounce back more quickly and you stay committed to your goals. And so here's the deal, right? Look back and identify your personal values. Here's 3 main ways. Number 1, reflect on peak moments. Think about times you felt truly happy, fulfilled, and proud. What values were at play? So if you had success in this business previously, during that period, what values did you live by? Were you consistent, right? Were you disciplined? Were you resilient? Right? Those are key words that matter overall. Number 2, identify what triggers you. Consider situations that make you angry or frustrated, and often they reveal violated values. Number 3, you choose your core values, right? You want 3 to 5 minimum, but ideally get to 10. And here's one way you can look at this. Here's a great way to look at this. This is something I've done too. But you look at the people in your life that you admire, and what do they value? For me, I wrote down things like work ethic, growth, discipline, consistency, honesty, and loyalty. Right? Those are very, very important to have. And so then you take those values and you turn them into principles. Principle, I'm in control of myself. Right? A principle is a statement. A belief is when you live it out. I'll say it again. A principle is a statement. Belief is when you live it out. That makes sense to you guys? Which I think is very, very important for us to look at. Make a list where your values are. List a set of principles that support the values. And then you set boundaries to these values. What's a cool way that you can do that in today's time?
Write it down.
Let's say I write my 10 values down, right? My 10 top values for me and who I want to be in 2026. Then what can I do? Put that, that's a great way to put it, right? I can put it into ChatGPT and say, I want you to write me 10 different principles that explain these core values of myself that I can read every single day, right? So I'm a person who shows up with discipline every single day, right? That's a great way to look at a principle. And so I read the principle, allows me to have, that's what I do with 1K Blake every single day. Questions about that? Chris, what are you hearing?
Just how important it is to change from being